Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host. My guest today is Aaron Saft, an All-American runner at NC State University, USATF Trail Marathon Champion, Team USA Mountain Runner, and a finisher of just about every bucket list ultra you can name. Hardrock, UTMB, Leadville, Western States, the Bigfoot 200. He's also the founder of Running is Life Coaching, where he personally coaches 75 athletes. But here's the puzzle Aaron helped me work through. Why do people who've just suffered through 100 miles start planning the next one 30 minutes after they finish? Aaron has lived on both sides of that question, as an elite competitor chasing podiums, and as a coach who spent 25 years learning that suffering and joy aren't opposites. We talk about what 100 miles teaches you that a marathon never will, the upside down family photo he pins to his quad at mile 80, and what happens in the dark middle of an ultra where the only questions that matter is, what do you need? Welcome to On Adventure. Here's Aaron Saft. All right, Aaron Saft, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. And you come very highly recommended from a prior guest, Terry Foxworth, who had some great stories himself. But after reading your bio, I'm really looking forward to spending the next little bit talking to you about the things that you've done and what you've learned through that process. So thanks for joining me today, and welcome to the On Adventure podcast.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you are, in fact, I think you call yourself Mr. Running Pains. Is that?
It's actually an acronym. MR
so not
is
Mr.
where
MR.
I'm from. MR, yeah,
I
MR Running Pains. It was just kind of a play on things.
Yeah.
But that was my old business when I used to put on events, and I just didn't feel it was who I was as a coach. So when I got away from events and was still had MR Running Pains, I didn't like the connotation. So I moved away from MR Running Pains and transitioned to Running is Life, which kind of comes from Ted Lasso.
Cool.
And football is life. So that's what I try to embrace, is just the joy of this sport of this piece of my life.
Yeah. So that, man, we jumped into the deep end right there. I didn't even mean to, but that's a really cool, like, realization that words matter, and the framework and I'm sure the mindset that the words created play out in your endurance exploits, and then I'm sure with other people that you coach. So talk to me a little bit about how you kind of came to that realization and when you made that change.
So my first marathon was, I have to think back, around 2000, I want to say. It was in Vermont. I did Vermont City and Burlington, and I had naively thought I could run a lot faster than what my body was ready for. And I ended up with some very severe cramping, and I hobbled in, I finished. And, I then came up with my now email, runningpains@gmail.com. So if anybody needs to contact me, you can contact me through runningpains@gmail.com. So then it spun into this MR Running Pains that I used for quite some time, creating events that I thought would challenge people. I kind of thought it was a fun play on things, but quickly realized as I transitioned away, as I said, from putting on events to going full-time with coaching, that I didn't like what that brought to mind. Like, running should not always be painful. If you're doing it right, you can get a lot of joy and exuberance from a run. So I was like, well, I need to change this, because this isn't who I am or what I want to represent. And that's where Running is Life began. It was kind of born from that realization that I want the runners I coach to enjoy it and find joy in this sport, even though, as you said, we do suffer, but it's not needlessly, because we also find joy in these moments as well. There's plenty of suffering, no doubt, but there's also joy in not only in the accomplishment of what you're doing, but in the process. And that's what we can't miss. I always tell my runners that training is, it's the journey. It's 99% of what we do. And the 1% is the celebration of the event that you're doing. So, take joy in the process and, joy along the way. So that's kind of where running is life comes from. We take a lot away from running. We learn so much from it. It gives us valuable life lessons, and and life gives us valuable running lessons. So
Yeah.
they go hand in hand.
So when I was growing up, I played baseball. I was not a naturally fast runner. In fact, after an injury, I became a pitcher pretty much only, which pitchers don't do a whole lot other than throw a ball. And when you're not throwing a ball, at least in my day, we would run poles. That was how we got in shape, which is running back and forth in the outfield. It was the most mindless, boring thing. And doing it in cleats it did not feel good. And for somebody that was not a natural runner, it was never anything that I enjoyed. And in fact, that running poles was what we were punished with at times. Like, you do something wrong, you go run poles, right? So running was a punishment for much of my growing up years. And it wasn't until I got probably in my late 20s and very out of shape where I started running again, and through doing triathlons. And after getting in some level of shape, I got to a point of thinking, well, this can be fun. Like, it does hurt because I'm still getting used to this, but now my favorite thing in the world to do is to go run trails and be out in the woods. And so the spectrum that I just painted, that I think I'm not all that unique, in that people have a lot of negative running experiences as a kid, unless they're into cross country running or something else that's a sport that they enjoy. And at some point into adulthood, it becomes, well, this is kind of a fun thing to do. And especially if you're doing it with other people, then there's camaraderie and community through that. So talk to me a little bit about, does any of that resonate with you, or were you in your growing up years, was running it interact differently with you?
It initially started as something I couldn't stand. I was a soccer player, and I didn't want to run. My coaches wanted me to run because I could run, but I chose, I wanted to be goalie and do as least amount of running as possible. And it got to a point where I believe I was in like middle school, and our middle school, our 8th grade, we could try out to be on the JV high school team. And we did a mile time trial. And just as you were talking about, I couldn't stand my cleats. They just were like, they were really rough on my feet. So I went barefoot, and I ran this mile barefoot around the soccer
Did you
field.
really?
And I started lapping people in a mile. And the coaches were like, I think this guy's in the wrong sport. So they told me about cross country, because I wasn't going to make the JV team, and all my friends were going to be up there. They're like, we have to keep some people on the 8th grade team. We want you to be on the 8th grade team, but we also feel like you might want to try cross country. I mean, I had never heard of cross country in my life. And so I went out for cross country. I had a, great experience right off the bat, mostly because I was successful with it. But then I met one of the most influential people in my life, which was my high school cross country coach. So at the end of 8th grade, he sat in a gymnasium, just, him, and there's this little table, and if you could picture a big gymnasium, and at half court, there's this guy with longer hair, probably in his 40s, that, there's nobody in the gym. It's just me and my friend walk up to the table. And
I can picture that.
It was it was an interesting moment, but that moment was, I met somebody that changed my life, and, presented me with these unique opportunities, and showed me that, like, running can be so much more, and you can go so many places and do so many things with it. And, that from that moment forward, running was very different to me. Because, I'd call him up, and I'd be like, it'd be a blizzard up in New York. And I'd be like, you ready to go for a run? And he'd be like, you got it. And I would run over to his house. We'd go for a run, and I'd run back home. That's just the kind of guy he was, just solid, just amazing human being. We're still in touch. We still talk, and we talk about running. We talk about coaching, just, phenomenal human being. So that was, obviously very influential in who I became and what I'm doing now. I think those high school years were really foundational in what really secured my love for running, because of all the things we did. We'd go for a run like around the school, but then like on the weekends, he would take us to different like trailheads and such. And so we just, really enjoyed that high school experience with him. And then from there went on to college. I ran at college, which was a very different experience coming from this, this very, almost nurturing background of having this, this really phenomenal male figure in my life to, now just this almost sterile environment where I was, just an athlete where, not much, just other than my contributions of what I could do with my 2 feet.
Where'd you go to college?
It was a very different experience through college. And I think a lot of my teammates lost that love for running because not many of them continued afterwards.
Oh, wow.
They just didn't feel that, that need to run. And I just continued because I loved the experience and what it brought my life. So I just continued after college and, and found different avenues of keeping it interesting and fun for me.
Yeah. And then you've turned it into largely a career built around the community, which says a lot. Where did you go to undergraduate?
I did my undergrad and grad at NC State. We had a great program, very successful while I was there. Really, like I said, very amazing experiences. We were ACC champions 5 times. We were third at NCAAs in cross country. It's like I said, I had great opportunities there. We raced all over the place and got to race against some phenomenal competition. So, for what it was, the environment that the university, for those that haven't experienced university athletics, it definitely was much different than let's go for a fun run on Saturday, where, it became, let's go train hard on Saturday. So very different.
Was it more of a job, like that kind of level of commitment?
To make it like one, it was very rote, very like, this is what we need you to do this morning. This is what we need you to do this afternoon. Your schedule was planned. It was just like, you got to get this done. And then we're racing on Saturday, like it was very cut and dry. And if you didn't perform, obviously you either lost your spot or, you were off the team, depending on the severity of what you were doing. So it
seems like that would be a major culture shock coming from what you described through, as
it was hard.
The nurturing idea through high school.
I was grateful for the fact that my coach let me redshirt basically my entire freshman year. I ran indoor track my freshman year, but cross country and outdoor, I redshirted so that I could get used to the new volume that we were doing. Some of my teammates came from a higher volume system and I wasn't as experienced with high volume. So I was grateful for that. I made a better transition than, if I had to race like right as soon as I got there. So there wasn't as much pressure for me my freshman year, which I think helped my transition. Yeah. It was hard being away from home. I was, a good 12, 13 hours away from home. My first time being away that long. Communication back then was much different. We could basically make a collect call every now and again to back home. Email wasn't a thing. You had to use a letter and stamp if you wanted to really communicate much.
What's that?
I know, exactly. So it was a very different time, and that made it very difficult and challenging too. My family is very important to me. And that was, that was a really big challenge for me too, was kind of getting past that. I was pretty homesick my freshman year and even into my sophomore year. It was hard finding my place. I'm very outgoing and a lot of runners aren't. And I was having a hard time getting my footing and finding my place amongst that team. Then my sophomore year, my best friend came from New York, and that started to make things much, much better and much easier for me.
I gotcha.
So the college experience changed once he came around. And our junior year, we were roommates, so, and that just changed my world. We were able to have a great time and experience this together and go through it together. So that was, that was a big moment for me too.
Very cool. So how many miles were you logging each week in high school compared to college?
Probably 30 to 40 in high school, which, today's standards is pretty low mileage for upperclassmen. But in college, we started transitioning pretty early. I came in with about 65 miles a week. And like by the end of my freshman year, I was up to 85, 90 miles a week. And then sophomore year, I was into, 100 plus weeks.
Wow. And what distances were you running?
So cross country was 8K during the season, 10K in championships. And then indoor, I raced the mile and 3K, and I'd be on the relays, the distance medley relay and whatever else they needed. Outdoor, I was a steeplechaser, also ran the mile and whatever relays they needed me to run.
I gotcha. So you graduate from state, and you said earlier you got a master's degree as well. Is it in sports or was it in a different
Education?
education?
My undergrad was in Spanish education. So I like my early years out of college, I was a Spanish teacher and I guess we would say like exceptional children, special needs, that area as well. That was my master's.
That's awesome.
I finished my undergrad in 4 years and I still had eligibility. So I got another year into my master's. And then when I started teaching, I finished up my master's. So.
Gotcha. Did you teach in Raleigh at any of the schools?
I taught just outside of Raleigh in Fuquay, Verena.
Oh, yeah, Fuquay.
Yep. So I taught there for about 3 years. And then my wife went to medical school in Blacksburg, Virginia at Virginia Tech.
Okay.
So we moved to Virginia for 4 years. And that's where I met Ben Thomas, who coaches Cole Hocker. He was the Olympic gold medalist in the 1500. So that's where I met Ben Thomas. I got a lot of tutelage. I was a volunteer assistant coach. So I learned a lot from Ben in my time there. I continued teaching. There was this is where the connection with my run shop comes in. I did a run shop for a while, and my best friend who I was business partners with there, that's where I met him, was in Virginia. He worked at the local run shop. He was the manager there. So that's, a lot happened while we were in Virginia. Is where my son was born, my firstborn. He was born in 2007. And that was right as we transitioned from Virginia to here in North Carolina. And that's when I opened up the run shop with my friend, was 2007. So the time there was wonderful. It was like I was in the mountains, so I was in my happy place, got a lot of running in. That's like where I really started to get into trail running.
The trails around there are fantastic.
Yes, absolutely. I had not yet done an ultra to that point. Everything was sub ultra.
Okay.
I still trained for marathons and under, but really started enjoying being out on the trails and being a part of the outdoors. I played a lot of disc golf during that time, but really found my foothold and my love for a lot of the outdoors and trails there.
What would you say, and I guess maybe another way to ask this is, do you have a preference between road running versus trail running? But if you could describe the difference between those two experiences, how would you put that into words?
So I think they're starting to bleed together as trail running becomes more popular. I found, or I currently find, road running to be a lot more commercial. There's a lot of sponsorships and, sponsors are very in your face. And that's what we're starting to see in trail running. Whereas when I first started trail running, it was very, very much in its infancy, right? We're filling out paper registrations. You could sign up the day of. Now we're talking about you have to go online and get into a lottery in order to get into a lot of these races. So like I said, the worlds are merging because of the popularity. Trail running wasn't as popular at the time, whereas now it's exploding. Be it, whatever race it is, they typically sell out. I still road race, and I still like to road race because it's been a part of who I am for years. And I'm running the New York City Marathon this year. I finally got in through the lottery. It took me 14 years, but I finally got in. So that's, like I said, it's still a part of my life and still things that I want to do on the road. But my heart is on the trails. I am happiest when I'm on the trails. It's not hard to be in a hard moment and take a stop and look around and be like, yeah, it's tough right now, but it ain't bad. Whereas if I'm doing a road race, it's tougher to find that truth.
Yeah.
There's certainly beauty in the road, but at the same time, it's just not trails.
So when did you go from, for a lot of people, marathon is a very long way, but that's the longest way that they can consider. When did you go, okay, that's not far enough, I can do more? And talk me through a little bit about why you decided to push beyond that.
So I won the Trail National Championships in the marathon in 2007, the year my son was born.
Okay. And
I said, I've been doing marathons for about 7 years, and I loved being on the trails. I loved running that far, but I had this itch to see what an ultra would feel like. What would going through the marathon and beyond, what would that feel like? My first ultra was in Virginia. It was on the New River Trail. It was a 50K, pretty flat, cinder trail, very runnable, great first 50K that still exists. And, you know, I raced it like I was in a marathon, you know, and I had a good experience, had a good time. And, you know, I got done and my wife's like, "What'd you think?" I was like, "Yeah, that was pretty cool, but like, I don't think I need to go any further." And, you know, I finished that in 2008. And then, you know, like my circle here that I began to know in Western North Carolina, they were all, you know, doing longer and longer things. We have things like the Art Loeb Trail here. They're like, "You got to check this trail out." So they started exposing me to these long, you know, adventure runs, not necessarily races, just long adventure runs.
Just doing it for the fun of it.
Yeah. I was like, this is amazing. Like, these trails are phenomenal. This is so cool. Like, I can go out with my friends for, you know, 7-8 hours and cover this long trail and do things that people like backpack for 3 days. And I'm like, this is, you know, this is something different. And so that began to expose me to longer runs, longer events. And, you know, I started just making friends with people that were doing ultras, and they're like, you know, you should try doing a 50 miler, or, you know, whatever it was. And started planting that seed in my brain. And we all know how seeds, when they start watering them, they start growing.
Tend to grow.
Yeah, exactly. So then began my adventures down the road of experiencing longer and longer events. It took me from 2008 to 2016 to do my first 100 miler. Most people are really surprised that it took me that long, but like I was in no rush, nor did I have any desire to really do one up to that point. What really pushed me was this extrinsic motivation of getting this really cool trophy. There was a bear trophy. I love bears. And there was a bear trophy, really, really cool pose of this bear. It was in Ultrarunning magazine. I saw this article. I was like, wow, that looks pretty cool. And it was a series, but in order to do it, you had to do 350Ks, a 50 miler, 100K, and 100 miler, all in the same calendar.
And you got the bear trophy?
6 races. And so you got the bear trophy if you did all 6. And so that began my walk down that path of doing, you know, longer and longer events. That was 2016. And I actually did a lot more than just those races that year. I really was like a little bit race crazy that year. But yeah.
All of those races were in the same year, and you did more races on top of that?
I did, yeah. Wow. Because foolishly, the way it is 350Ks in the spring, and then the fall actually starts out with the 100 miler. You do the Grindstone 100 miler, and then it was the Mountain Masochist 50 miler, and then Hellgate 100K. That's how you finish the year. So you start the fall with the 100 miler. I had only done like a 50 miler prior to that, so I wanted to experience something a little bit further. So I did 250 milers in June, and then 125K up in Canada in July, just to experience what 75 miles would feel like. Yeah. And then again, you know, going to Grindstone 100 and then was October. And so did a lot that year, learned a lot, you know, certainly learned a lot, but I had some fantastic experiences. But that began my desire to run some of these more bucket list races like Western States and Hardrock, because it earned me the lottery tickets that
you qualified earlier.
So yeah, I had to keep those tickets rolling. So I had to keep running 100 milers. So that's how they get you.
Yeah. Get the hook in there real deep, and it's hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
Well, so you've raced all kinds of different races, and you know, from short stuff to really, really long, and you've done up to a 200-mile race. I mean, so I want to ask you a little bit about that, but in your words, what does a 100-mile race or a 200-mile race teach you about yourself that a marathon or something shorter doesn't?
100 miler requires so much of presence, whereas like a marathon, you can break it up. You know, like I can say, you know, it's all right. I'm gonna have an aid station in 2 miles, or I'm gonna have, you know, I'm gonna do this 4 miles, and then, you know, maybe I'll change my pace. You know, the blocking is totally different. Whereas in a 100 miler, you have to be present mile by mile. What do I need at this moment that's going to help me at mile 99 to get across that finish line? Whereas like in a marathon, you pretty much know what you have to do. I have to consume a gel or, drink something this frequently. Whereas in a 100-miler, your stomach may go at mile 16 and you're throwing up and you're like, God, what do I do now? Right. So you're problem solving and trying to be present and say, okay, so what do I need to do right now so that I can keep going, so I can get to that finish line? And a lot of times it's problem solving, and it's how deep and how hard, or, how bad do you want it, right? Like how bad do you want that finish? I always talk about in 2023, I did the Grand Slam of Ultrarunning, which we started with Western States, and then we were supposed to do the Vermont 100, but that's the year that Vermont had the really bad flooding and the race was canceled. So we had to find an alternative race. So we went up to Wisconsin and ran the Badger 100, and then I did Leadville 100, known as one of the tougher ones because of the elevation, the altitude, and then you finish with Wasatch. And unfortunately, I had just got back from Italy, switched bags, and flew to Utah for the Wasatch 100 and picked up some kind of bug. Felt it coming on the day before. The day of, I spiked a fever of over 100 in the race. The temperatures were already in the 90s. So being in the 90s and having a temperature over 100 did not feel great at all. But this was the last race. This was, if I finished this one, I finished the Grand Slam and got another one of those really cool trophies. So, again, how bad did I want it? And so my friend who was pacing me at the time called my wife. My wife's a doctor, and kind of explained what was going on. She's like, all right, when you get into the next aid station, find him some Tylenol, see if you can break the fever, do some cold stuff to help his throat, because my throat was really scratchy. And she was just trying to do things to help me. She's like, gargle salt, whatever you can, whatever they have at the aid station. Now, for those that don't understand what an aid station is, you're going to a remote location that these people have probably taken 4-wheel drive vehicles to get to. They don't have a lot. So, it's asking a lot to get there and be like, hey, do you have X, Y, and Z? Thankfully, they had Tylenol. And they had ice pops. Thank God they had ice pops.
Oh, really?
The ice pops were amazing, and it helped me so much. I still couldn't quite talk right. My friend was like, people were asking me questions when we were out there, and my friend was like telling them, the answers, because I was like a frog. But the fever finally broke during the night. The temperature dropped into the 30s. My fever broke, but I felt like exhausted, and I just laid on the side of the trail for a second with another friend. I was like, dude, just give me 15 minutes, let me sleep, and we'll get up and we'll get going. When I woke up, I was changed. Whatever had really had its grip on me let go. Thank God.
Wow.
And I was able to move on and finish. But it's these moments that that's what you learn in a 100-miler, is that you can be at the brink and being like, God, how am I going to finish this?
Yeah.
And then giving yourself the time and the strategy and implementing the thought into it and putting a plan in action that can keep you in a race and get you to the finish line. And that's a lot of what I take away, is that, our bodies are incredible. Like we push hard, we push to the brink sometimes we push beyond. I've had races where I've pushed beyond and I couldn't come back from it. But that moment, it was one of those make or break. It was like, I've done 3 100-milers. This is my 4th and final one. Can I get through it? And, thankfully I was able to do so. And it was because of a lot of other brains than just mine. So it takes a team.
Yeah. That's a great point that I hear over and over again. And I have not done a 100-miler myself, but that there gets to a point where your brain really is shutting down. And so there's limited capacity to do the problem solving and thinking through, and which can create a dangerous situation or, a bad decision going the wrong way. And so it's super important to have a good team around you. But one of the things that I see over and over again that is just fascinating to me is what you just described is really a nice edge between stretching into, out of the comfort zone into the growth zone, versus if you go too far, you've entered the death zone. And that razor's edge, yes, it's helpful to have people that are well versed enough to speak into that as it's happening, of helping you decide where you're at. But I think, and this is really a question for you, that it seems to be acclimation as well. Like, you don't just get off the couch and go do these things. You've spent hours and hours and hours testing and pushing and testing and pushing to figure out what's too far. But how do you know in that moment? And you've done these over and over again. How do you know when it's time to unlace your shoes and call it a day versus give me 15 minutes and then let's keep going?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point, because it's hard to know. So what I always tell the runners that I coach is that if there is something that, is going to potentially cause you to stop running for a long extended period of time, some sort of injury, right, then it's time to stop, right? Like if there's something that is going to put you in potential harm's way, right? Like if you're talking to the medical staff and they're like, this is, you can't go on, then you need to listen to the professionals, right? Like I was over in Italy last year. I was doing the Tour de Géants, which is like roughly, it's another 200 plus miler in the Alps. And wow. I was just short of 40 miles in. I fell. I hit my head and wow. I likely broke some ribs and my scapula. I had 2 miles to hike out. Like there is the potential. I had a tracking device where I could hit the button and have somebody, come get me. But I was able to walk. Like my lower extremities were okay. I knew I hit my head and I wasn't quite right. But thankfully the daylight was coming. I had gone through the night and
this was still dark.
It was still dark when I did it.
Boy. But
it's getting light. And like I said, I'm about 2 miles away. So I made the decision, right or wrong, I made the decision to get to the aid station. I knew my wife was there and my friend was there. And like, if things were really bad, at least they were there and they could get me out. So I got to the aid station. The medical person was asleep. Again, my wife's a doctor. I'm telling her, like, I've got my sunglasses on and the lights were they were killing me. I'm like, it's so bright, my head's pounding. And she's like, you got your sunglasses on. I was like, I know. I can't take it. And she's like, all right, close your eyes. And so, I closed my eyes and she went to take off my pack. And like there was my right side. She went to and I just flinched, like grimaced. I was like, no, don't touch. Like that really hurt. She's like, really? I was like, yeah, I fell, I hit my back, and she's like, well, we got to check you out. And you talk about like pain. Like I tried to slide the pack off. And finally the medic's awake and he's like, what's going on? And, he's asking me questions. As soon as he heard that, like I hit my head and the lights were bright and I couldn't really get my pack off, he cut my medical bracelet. He was like, you're done. You got to go to the hospital.
That was it.
That was it. No questions asked. It was like, they made that decision for me. Like I wasn't going to continue, obviously. Like there was no way I could, not in the condition I was in. But like, it's listening to the people around you and letting them make those decisions. It makes it a little bit more tolerable to swallow thereafter.
Yeah.
When it's like somebody else is taking you out of the race. If you're taking yourself out of the race, again, like it's, if you give yourself time and it's not improving, it's probably a good time to quit. But if you're giving yourself time and you're getting better, like give yourself a little bit more time and see what happens. So if things improve, then it can. Now you can relapse and things can get worse again. And that's, again, another deciding point when you talk to your team around you, like, here's what's happened. Like it happened to me in a race here in North Carolina. I was, again, spiking a fever. I got to an aid station. There was a doctor there. He's like, I don't have a thermometer, but yeah, I think you're burning up. So that we tried some, Tylenol to break the fever and such. And I was able to continue, but I started going up to Mount Mitchell, our highest mountain here, and I started experiencing the fever again. It came back. I got up there and it started hailing and stuff, and I had all my layers on, and I'm just absolutely miserable, just like, and nobody had to tell me. I was like, my race is over. Like I just spiked a fever again. This is, I don't need to be out here. Like I don't need to get worse. I don't need to put myself into a worse situation and have somebody come, get me. So, I had to stop up there. So, over time, you get to know your body, you get to know what it's capable of. If you're new to it, then it's more sensible to rely on others that understand it better and know, this is probably the best answer, which is hard, to accept that.
That's a good word and a good distinction between when to listen to others and, because what you described going up Mount Mitchell, spiking a fever, shivering, like if you had kept going, those are the kind of things that, if it gets really bad, your organs start shutting down, right?
Right.
And so there's this element of resilience and pushing through, not stopping just because it's hard, but there does get to a point where the body just it's not about pushing it starts shutting down. And it sounds like you've listened to others, but you've also kind of learned that along the way. And that's the more physical side. Talk to me a little bit about what and I've experienced bits and pieces of this and what I've done, but I hear it all the time about what happens between the ears is as much of a challenge as what is happening physically in the rest of the body. So how do you work your way through those things that inevitably come up between your ears as you're doing these longer things?
Sure. We were just talking about this. We did what's called an Everesting. And basically you do repeats on the same climb until you reach over 29,000 feet of climbing. And now I know that Everest isn't 29,000 feet of vertical gain, but it's, the same principle of basically getting that elevation. So when you're on the same lap and doing the same lap over and over again until you get this number of 29,000, there's a lot that goes through your brain, right? Especially early on, it's hard to stay in that lap because you're like, exactly how many laps you got to do. In our case, it was 23 laps. We had to do 23 laps on this same route. It's going to take us about 61 miles, roughly 100K of running because we were going up and down.
Wow.
What we found was that the further we got into it, the harder it became to stay present because you realized each time you still had X amount of vertical gain or X amount of laps to still do. And with each lap roughly taking about an hour, you knew how much time you were still going to be out there, which plays on the brain more and more the further you got into this. So it was extremely challenging to really not think about what was left, right? What it became was, okay, I've got, this lap. And then after I finish this climb, I only have to do this climb X amount of more times, right? So it became almost like a bargaining with yourself to say, there's only this much more and you're going to finish. Now, it never came to the point neither of us, I did it with a friend. Neither of us were ever to the point where we were like, this isn't going to happen. It was just like, how much longer is it going to take for this to happen? Okay. Which, there is quite a difference, right? Like when you're in a race and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this, I'm not going to finish, right? Whatever be the circumstance, that's a really tough moment to acknowledge that you're going to accept a DNF, a did not finish. Whereas here, it was a matter of just finding that space in the brain that made it okay that you still had X amount of time to go, right? Or, X amount of lap, whatever, metric we're looking at. So in a race, again, it's really tough when you get into those deep, dark moments. People hear it called the pain cave, whatever term we're giving it. In those moments, that's where we have to turn into our internal motivation, right? Like I talked about earlier, that extrinsic motivation of getting that shiny trophy, right? But there has to be something internally that drives us further, right? Like something that matters to us deeply and passionately that will push us further. For me, it's my family, right? Like I typically, I'll post an upside down picture on my quad. I'll pin an upside down picture of my family on my quad so that when I look down, I see my family. And I think about my kids. I think about my wife. I think about sacrifices that they had to make for me to be able to train for it and be out there racing. I think about the lessons that I teach my kids and doing these things, because when I'm out there and they see that dad is gritting it out, like this is not the easiest thing. He's suffering, but he's doing it. He's going to get to the finish line. And they've seen me on both sides. They've seen me when I don't finish and how I deal with it. And how I deal with it is important as well. When I don't, because they see that as well. I want them to see the authentic me, not the, like, I'm down, oh, pity me. Like, yeah, it happened. What lessons am I taking away from this? How am I not going to do this in the next adventure? Right. Or like when I'm in a deep, dark moment, like they've seen me come in crying. Like it's, it's the moment where you're really broken down. Like just shaken. Yeah, exactly. Like this is probably one of the harder things that I'm doing right now at this moment. And you're here experiencing with me. And my little girl, like she had one moment and she's like, Dad, I want to see you finish like I did at the 100K, and that's all it took. I was like, grab my poles. Like we're going, like we're doing
Here
this.
we go.
Like I'm done with my pity party. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, having that kind of that intrinsic value, that motivation is what will push you through and get you over that edge. It has to be a deep driven love and desire, for it to override those moments where you're just like, I'm done, because like, it's like, I think the best way I've heard it is that when I was at Leadville, the RD was like, yeah, like we call the edge of the mine when the miners are down there digging and they get to that wall, we call that the debt, right? Like that's the debt. That's where, they're driving deeper and deeper, and we all have a debt, right? And then he became like, we have a debt to, our spouses. We have a debt to the people that came out to the races. Like these are the people that have made sacrifices to us. And I got to the halfway point in Leadville, and it was pretty hot. We had just gone over Hope's Pass, which is just below 13,000 feet. I got down to the aid station. I'm supposed to have a drop bag down there, but something happened, and my drop bag was completely empty. All the gear that I needed to get back up and over the mountain back to the aid station was gone. I had nothing, and I needed something because I was already starting to cramp. I wasn't anywhere near cutoff, thankfully. Like I had that on my side, but I needed some items, right? So I went over to the aid station table and just started chugging whatever electrolytes they had. I was like, okay, this is what I need right now to make me be able to get back out there at least. Now, when I get back out there, what am I going to do? Right? Like, how am I going to solve this problem? And then I looked around to the people around me, and, I could have just sat there and felt sorry for myself and been like, gosh, like my race is over. Like, it's like, there's no point in going back. But instead, like I chose to say, no, this isn't the end. Like this is the moment like that I look for, that challenge to me, right? To say, hey, it's more than me, right? There's people back at that aid station waiting for me. They came out here to be with me and be a part of this. I need to get back to them. So how do I do that, right? So I started asking the runners around me, hey, do you guys have any electrolytes I can have? Any, gels, whatever. Is there anything extra that you guys can provide? My drop bag's gone. And, runners are awesome people. This community is fantastic. And they
do that all the time
without a thought. They were like, yeah, I got 2 extra gels. Yeah, I've got like this packet of electrolytes. So, I was restocked, and I was like, we're back in this, and that positivity changed everything, because I was, like when I saw my drop bag empty, my heart sank.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
sure,
this is already hard enough, like I don't need any other challenges. But that response, it really changed my perspective. Like I was like, people are awesome.
Yeah.
So I got back to the aid station, got back to my friends, and the race was on. It's tough sometimes where we talk about those mental challenges. They happen more often than not, right? But it's how we deal with them that is really going to make or break your race.
Yeah, so sometimes I ask people about what they learn about themselves from pushing into very hard, dark places. Other times it comes up what they learn about humanity in general. And I think that's what you just hit on, is that I think it seems to happen over and over again that at our core as human beings, we want to care for each other, right? Take the politics, take the hot button points out of a conversation. And when you're just human to human and you see somebody struggling, you want to help them. You want to do something about that. And it's really cool to me that an ultra marathon becomes the place where that is seen and experienced. Have you seen that more than just in this race?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, the mentality, the sentiment is we're all in it together, right? Like in an ultra, it's most times like you've got your elites, right? Like that are racing, right? And it's not to say that they don't help each other, that they're they're that, volatile towards one another. They still help one another. Like I've been in that position too. But now in the latter parts where like I'm now kind of, the top quarter, if you will, like it's everybody's in this together. Like what, if somebody's down sitting on a rock, you just stop. It's not even a thought. You just say, what do you need? Like, it's not, how are you? You can see how they are. You don't ask, how are you? We don't, like, that's one question you don't ask an ultra runner. Pacers know that as well. Don't ask an ultra runner, how are you? We all know how we are. You say, what do you need? Right? That's the question. Like, what can I give you that I have on me that can help you? And that's just, it seems innate. That's just something that's in everyone. It's a, I mean, it's wonderful. It's beautiful. It doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter whatever. Like, we don't have to get into any piece of that. It's just, that's a person right there. That person needs something. And if I have it, I'm going to give it to them. And that's what's awesome, and that translates, right? Like we get this mentality and we learn this, and then it becomes the same thing in life, and that's why I say running is life. It's, these people that they're going to do the same thing if they see somebody on the street than they did in an ultra, right? It just becomes part of who we are. And that's wonderful. I think like ultras change people in wonderful ways. And that's one of them for sure.
That's really, really cool. I love that side coming out of, a race like that. Every single person that was there, yes, it's chosen, but it's still suffering. It's still painful and hard, and true humanity shows up and takes care of others. One question that occurred to me, you've done what anybody that has been around running would call these races like the epic races, right? I mean, you've done Hardrock, correct? You've done Leadville, you've done UTMB, Bigfoot. I mean, all of those are, as you mentioned earlier, very hard to get into, but because they're epic courses, and they're epic courses because they're really challenging in a lot of different ways. So and especially for a competitive athlete, as you have been through high school and college, when you stand at the line at these races and you know that there are really, really good runners at your shoulders, where is the difference between the living into the adventure and pursuing the performance? And I don't know if that distinction makes enough sense, but really what I'm driving at is, do you have the ability, is it even possible to focus on high performance and achievement while at the same time, as you said earlier, really it's about the journey too? Like, outcome is less important. So talk to me a little bit about where that shows up for you.
And I think it's evolved. And that's something that has taken me a long time to evolve with. As I approach 40, we say level 49. we don't talk about age anymore. We say level 49. That. So as I approach level 49 here, my kind of growth as a person has become that, this race is not about like where I'm situated within a race. It's not about what place I'm in. It's about my journey from that start line to the finish line. If that journey puts me in a place where I'm in, such said place that I win a trophy, that's wonderful, right? But it's not my point. When I'm on that starting line, it's not my thought. When I'm at like halfway through, it's still not my thought. Now, like we got to mile 1, it was like 100 and maybe even over, because so Bigfoot's actually 209 miles. And we were in the tail end from like the last aid station to the finish. And we're on this road and there's a tracker and my pacer's with me. And, he's like, dude, 10th place is like right in front of you, just up there. Like we couldn't see them, but like, he's like, I think if you could, put down some like 10, 30-minute miles. And I know that sounds like, kind of funny.
After 200 miles?
After 200 miles, yeah. So, so anyway, I went down to like 10:30 pace, and I was like, it ain't in the cards, buddy. Like, like it's like 11:30 is about all I got right now. And that's okay. Like, I'm okay with where I'm at. Like if this is where I'm going to place, I'm fine with it, because for, I've gone the journey here over 200 miles, and that one place is not going to make this a better experience for me, honestly. It's just that finish line that's the goal, right? Like it's not some sort of superficial number, it wasn't about some sort of time. Sure, I wanted to finish as fast as possible because I didn't want to be out there for any longer than I had to be. but at the same time, it's become the fact that I have gone from starting point to finish point. I've covered the distance that was required for me to get that finish. And along the way, I hope to have a good time. And it doesn't always happen, but that's like my biggest thing anymore, is just to enjoy the experience while I'm there. And if it puts me in a good spot, that's wonderful. But if it doesn't, that's okay. Like if I got that finish, that's awesome. But if I didn't get the finish, it's one of those moments where I have to reflect and be like, was there something that I missed? Did I not do something in training? Did I not execute well on race day? There are external factors, but I don't want to look to, like, is there something I can blame it on externally? Well, then I should have adjusted for that, right? Like, is it altitude? Is it heat? Well, I could have trained for that. I could have done X, Y, or Z to make myself in better, position to deal with that. But it's not like looking at the line and be like, oh my God, there's such and such, like, I don't let that, the names, the people, they don't affect me like that anymore. Whereas I used to be like, oh my God, they're in this race. Like it used to. Yeah, it used to. I'd be like, oh my God, they're in this race, but not anymore. That's another person, they're a great person, a great runner, and I hope they have a great race, and if I see them along the way and we're running together, love to talk to them. But, if they're running way ahead of me, that's their day, right? Like they're having their day and I'm having mine. And like I talked about earlier, it's being present and being accepting of the present and saying, yep, this is where I'm at right now. And this is where I need to be if I want to get to that finish line, right? Like if I push a little bit harder, I may not get to that finish line. So I have to be mindful about where I'm at and what I'm doing.
Yeah. So it seems to me that what you described is coming more from a loving kindness towards my peer rather than pursuing this with my competitor, so I guess you could make that decision in the moment, but it sounds like this was a life value that you staked into the ground years ago, so that was already determined by the time you got to that point. Is that the right way to say it?
So like, we also have to say there's the piece that I don't get paid for this, right? Like I'm not a paid professional athlete. When I was a professional athlete, I still didn't get paid, right? Like I was sponsored, but that was a whole different topic, right? Like I got gear. That's what a professional athlete was when I was a professional athlete. Now these people have contracts, they get salaries, they get bonuses. Those people, it is extremely important to them of their place. There's value to that, right? Like that. But for me, I don't have that. Like that's the monetary is it's not a thing. Yeah. So what is it for me? And it's the enjoyment, right? Like that's what I get out of this is like enjoying the experience, having these memories, these stories that I can tell people, the experiences that I can share with my athletes. That's invaluable to me, right? Again, showing my kids what's possible. Like that's invaluable to me. So there's all of these other things than, what some are, they're motivated by. And I'm not saying that monetarily is the only thing that like people are motivated by if they're a professional athlete. They may still have some of these same values that I do, but I don't have that monetary piece, right? So it doesn't really make sense for me to worry about like, ooh, if I get, 2 more places, what's the difference? Right. That's some people worry about we have ultra sign up and they have these rankings and such. It seems like such a frivolous number to me, but again, it's taken me a long time to evolve to this point. And some people are still obsessed by those numbers, and that's fine. Like if that's your metric, if that's your thing, if that's what motivates you, I'm not judging, but this is where I'm at. And this is the way I see it. And so right or wrong, it's just different.
And I think about what you said a minute ago also about this being something that your kids are picking up on. I think legacy many times is not what we say or try to teach. It's what they catch from watching us. And I mean, you did such a great job of describing how your kids get to see you at your highest and lowest moments, and the values that you're passing on, they're catching that regardless of what you say to them. What else do you see through what you have pursued in your adult life? What do you see passing down to your kids at this point? Are they getting interested in running, or are they finding their own path?
My son is now a freshman in college. He runs for the University of Portland.
Okay.
My daughter is a freshman in high school and just competed at the state championships as a freshman and will go to nationals.
It's in the DNA.
It is. They've been raised in this sport. They love it too, but I let them come to that decision. And that's what a lot of parents ask me. Like, how did you get your kids so involved? I can't get them to run. I said, I didn't, like they chose to do this. This is like, my daughter was in elementary school and I still have the piece of paper that says like, I want to win 100-miler one day. That's like, that was in elementary school. Like one of the things that she wanted as a, whatever, second or third grader. Like that was her. Like again, they see what we do. And, they're going to mimic, what they aspire to be or what they are inspired by. So like, I just show them what's possible. We travel all over the place. And, my wife said, hey, like, why don't we just take a vacation? And the kids looked at her and like, are you nuts? Let dad choose. We go to some pretty awesome places and do some pretty fun stuff when he races. So just let dad choose. So, like she thought she was doing them a favor by not like going to a race or something, but that's what the kids want. They want to go to these locations. We're going out west this summer and we're going to, travel around out west and see the West and do some races while we're out there. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, we create the experiences for these kids and, like right or wrong, like it does, it shapes them and it becomes part of who they are. Like when they get older, I hope they do the same thing. Maybe not race 100 miles, but I hope they explore. Like, I hope they get out there and do these things and find the way to do it themselves and do what they love. Because, that's what I'm trying to teach them is just do what you love.
I really like that you use that word there. You hope they explore, because a lot of the people that I think listen to these conversations that I have, I call them everyday explorers. They're people that are just normal people like me and you, but they're pursuing different things in their life that push into these hard places to discover what they're made of. Where's the line? What can I do? And in doing so, I think that having that, I don't know if these two levers go together or not, but they sure seem to be very closely tied. But pursuing the pain that comes from doing these things increases the joy and satisfaction in living and experiencing life on planet Earth. And that's what I love hearing is the everyday explorer doing the things that lives their great life right now, not some point into the future. And I'll wait until this happens or until I have that. But you've done a great job describing this as this has been your life. Your family experience was built around it, and not to their detriment have they been exposed to these kind of things. So that to me is such a cool storyline, thread line that I've heard through what you've said. And I think that's for anybody listening, that's going to be a big takeaway about why would somebody do these races and then do them over and over again. And then you built a business on top of doing all of these things. I do have a couple questions before we finish on this, on your experience around the business. You had a brick and mortar store, if I read correctly, but now you've moved away from that and really have more of an online presence with your own podcast and with the coaching that you're doing with, if I read correctly, 100 different athletes that you train, all of it online, I assume. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes. So, I coached the local high school. So I coached my daughter.
Okay.
So I coached there. But yes, in COVID, we had a really tough decision. We were either going to shut the business down, which was a running store, or I could turn it over to my business partner and let him continue because it made more sense for him and what he did. He's a podorthist, so he creates orthotics. And so he was going to do that regardless. And, I wasn't going to continue with retail. Like that was, a decision that I had made that I was going to, just stop with retail. That, COVID kind of became a signal to me like this is a good point for me to step off. So I turned the business over to him, and said, I wish you the best of luck. And he's done tremendous. He's continued with the business. It's still open to this day. And that's when I started the podcast. And that's when I started coaching full time. I've been coaching since 2000. So I've been coaching for a long time, but not at the level I am now. roughly right now I have about 75 athletes that I coach.
Okay.
All of those adults are online. We work through a platform called Training Peaks, which allows me to see their runs and communicate with them. And it's my full-time job aside from doing the high school coaching. I've built this business over the last 6 years, and it's extremely rewarding. It's what what I love to do. I just recorded a podcast, and I kind of said, I feel like I'm doing what I was made to do. Like,
That's
this
awesome.
is sharing my knowledge, sharing my passion. Like, I'm just so fortunate to be able to do it.
Have you developed all 75 of those relationships just from, I'm sure some are people that but through having an online presence and people finding your podcast and stuff like that?
A lot is actually word of mouth.
Okay.
I'll coach somebody and they're like, hey, do you have room for somebody else? And, I'll say, yeah, like, let me have a conversation with them, because not every coach is the right fit, right? Like, there's people that like, I don't, my coaching style may not be suitable for, right? Like, they don't want that person that's going to be communicating with them every day. Some people just don't want to be coached. That's the reality, and I'll tell them if I feel like that's it. I don't want people wasting their money. Yeah. So, but like it's a lot of word of mouth. The podcast, certainly it generates people. The things that I do, people see me on Strava and, they're like, wow, he does a lot. They'll reach out, just through Strava or through social media. They'll kind of see my posts and such. I don't do a lot of coaching posts. That's not the authentic me. I know a lot of coaches like posting on social media, and it's just not me. I've never been a really big social media guy. So I don't use that avenue, but yeah, I think just word of mouth has been like my biggest help.
Gotcha. For anybody that's never had a running coach, without giving away the secret sauce, can you kind of paint a picture of what goes into that, and how do you develop a training plan for 75 different people without it being and feeling cookie cutter?
Mm-hmm. So every coach is different, and every coach is going to do it differently. I'll speak to how I do things. And so I typically work on a weekly basis. So typically I'd be programming for next week. Okay. So like this week, we're kind of seeing how things are going. If we need to make changes, we do so, right? But I'm not programming a whole training plan, right? So like it's not like they're saying, okay, I'm going to do this 100-miler. So I'm not building out the whole schedule. I'm only building out these micro cycles, right? These like 7-day cycles. Now, sometimes like right now I'm building out because I'm about to race myself. So I want to make sure their schedules are in there for when I'm gone. But I still communicate with them on a daily basis. If I'm, I always communicate, hey, I'm going to be on a blackout period from here to here because of my race, right? So don't expect to hear from me, but like they can message me and talk to me. They can leave comments in Training Peaks. So we typically have like a daily communication, on my side of things.
All of that's in Training Peaks?
So we use a communication app as well that like they can message me, and it's just like text messaging me, but it puts it all in one place. I have a call schedule, and they can get on the call schedule. It's not mandatory, but it's there each week if they want to have a phone call. We do team Zoom calls, so everybody hops on the call. This past week, we had one of our guys did the Cocodona 250, and so he talked about his experience out there. So we got to hear from other runners. So we do all sorts of things to be a little bit more communicative. We do a lot of learning experiences. We read books and talk about them. So coaching is a lot more to me than just me writing your schedule, right? It's learning what is the process. Why are we doing this? What is this, hoping to achieve? Like, what are we working on? So they understand that. Our last book that we read was Training for the Uphill Athlete, which is a kind of a very good training manual. It teaches you a lot of the principles that, we're going to use in order to train, and why we use these principles. What are we hoping to improve? So I think it's also part teaching. I'm not just coaching, I'm teaching, so that they understand what they're doing. And hopefully someday, if they're like, hey, I'm going to take a break from coaching, they'll know exactly what to do, right? Like if I've done a good enough job, then they're going to understand, this, and then some people will say, well, you're putting yourself out of business. Well, I'm also doing my job. Like I'm, showing them this is the way to do it, right? If I put myself out of a job, so be it. But, I'm hoping that, over time, we just kind of keep moving forward and evolving together, because training is always evolving. Science is always catching up with what we're doing and why we're doing it. So
I think, and for anyone that has ever run a business, me included, you always have that struggle between a scarcity mindset and an abundance mindset. And that comment, you're going to run yourself out of business. That's a scarcity mindset. That's saying there's only so many people that need a running coach, and you're going to teach them all how to do it themselves. And so when you play it out in reality, like, that just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But the abundance side is that, okay, if they can graduate and go on their own, they're going to have great things to say about you. So when their neighbor needs a running coach to start with, now you got 2 other people to work with, Yeah. And that's probably the word of mouth that you're talking about. So last question on that is, how do you price for this? Is it a flat amount? Is it how much interaction am I going to have with this?
Yeah, I'm the same to all my athletes. Like, okay. I want to make sure that they're all receiving the same treatment, and again, if somebody's looking for something different, then, obviously I'm not the right coach, but I charge $150 a month. I find that really reasonable in today's market.
That is very reasonable. I've heard a lot higher numbers.
Yeah. So I want it to be affordable, right? Mm-hmm. But that's also why I have so many athletes, right? Like, got it. I have to make my living as well.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of athletes, but I keep my price low. But I also offer a lot to my athletes, right? Like, I've had athletes that are like, hey, gonna take a break from coaching, and maybe they went and tried somebody else, and like the biggest thing that means the most to me is when they come back and be like, oh, I tried somebody else, it wasn't you.
Not the same.
Yeah, exactly. So for $150 a month, I do my best. That's and that's all I can do is do my best, continue to learn and evolve, and try to be the best coach I can be, just as I do with my running. So
that's awesome. Yeah, like any teacher or coach, would you agree that a lot that you learn as much from your students as they are picking up from you?
Absolutely. Each month, one of our team calls is lessons from the previous month. We create a doc, and everybody puts in the lessons that they took away from the previous month, and we just go through
crowdsourcing wisdom.
Yep. Yeah. So we just go through it. We record every conversation. I put it behind a private wall. And they can watch, if they can't come to the meeting, they can watch privately, and I send it out after the meeting so they can, watch it on their own time. But yeah, we talk about all these things, again, like, the 250 that, his name was Mike just did. We talked about his lessons and what he went through and how he got through it and all that stuff, so that they can hear these experiences and learn from him. And, of course, I still learn from them, because there's a lot out there, and I certainly don't know everything and don't pretend to. So, yeah.
That was a wild race to follow. Not,
Absolutely.
There was terribly a fatality during the race, but the women leaders just blew everyone out of the water. And
absolutely.
With times that just were crazy.
Oh, yes. Yeah. She set overall course record by like 7 hours or something. It was
not even close.
Phenomenal. It was amazing. Yes. Yeah. And scary. Mike's tracker wasn't working. And it made me worry, because I heard about the death, and they weren't saying male or female. There was no information.
They didn't say anything.
And his tracker was the only one that it wasn't showing information on. And so I began to freak out. So I texted him, no response. So I finally called, and thank God he picked up and alleviated my fears. And I felt so bad for waking him up, but it was one of those moments, and my heart goes out to the family of that runner that passed. This is one of the pieces of our sport that's one of the toughest to deal with. The runner died last year at Hardrock. I mean, we have a history with people die at events. It does happen, and it's the worst part of the sport, I believe, is when that tragedy strikes.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess we don't have to go down that road, but my mind goes to: are these just unfortunate one-off events, or is it someone not listening to the signals that their body? Maybe it's all of those at different times, but it does make the point that you absolutely should never go into one of these races unprepared in any way. And this is not a 5K that you just get off the couch and go do. So, Aaron, I want to end with some rapid fire questions. So you can throw it back at whatever comes up first. So, worst situation that you've been in a race?
let's see. I faced a grizzly bear in Canada. It was a mom grizzly bear and 2 cubs, and she was doing her head roll. At the time, I had no idea what a head roll was, but that was the moment where she was about to annihilate me. I made it through, obviously unscathed, but that was the closest I've probably been to death.
Oh my gosh. How did you get out of that?
I ran.
Yeah. And you still wanted the bear trophy.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
That was actually the 125K right before the 100-miler, right before Grindstone. It was that year.
Jeez. This may be, stepping in, like asking a religious question what's your favorite shoe?
Right now, it's the Ultra Lone Peak 9 Plus. So it's got the Vibram outsole. It's what I've been waiting for years. So that's
I run in the Lone Peak 9. Those have been my last 2 shoes. So maybe this is me, but both pairs around 400 miles have started ripping at the crease.
Oh, interesting.
And so maybe they don't fit. Maybe that's one thing I was running this morning thinking about that. Maybe they're not the right fit, but it's been the exact same time in the exact same places. But other than that, I love that shoe.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between that and the Plus?
So the Plus, as I was saying, has the Vibram outsole. So yours has the Max Track. So the compound of the carbon rubber on the bottom isn't as sticky as the Plus. The Plus has the Vibram.
How many miles do you typically get out of a shoe?
I've been crushing 2 pairs for quite some time. So I've got probably well over 500 or 600 miles on them. And I haven't had them rip on me, but again, everybody's different. So, I've had problems with some ultras in the past with quality control, but with these, I have not yet. So yeah,
that's good to know.
Look into. Yeah.
What's your best race?
Best race was probably that 2007 Trail Marathon Championships. It was just one of those days that, man, everything went right and
everything just clicked.
Yep.
What's your worst race?
I would say Western States in 2023. Yeah, I got super sick, was really questioning my ability to finish up until mile 80. And then something flipped. Like my stomach finally was like, all right, yeah, I'll let you run. So that one or the High Lonesome 100, and that was 2024. Yeah.
Where's that race?
Yeah, 2024. That's in Colorado.
Okay.
And same type of thing. It was around like mile 16. My stomach flipped, and I was eating pretzels for the remainder of the race. I ate pretzels for, basically 4 miles.
Oh my
so
goodness.
that was rough because anytime I tried to eat anything else, I'd vomit. So it was, so between those two, it was, but I finally started to dial in my nutrition again. It took a lot of time and practice.
Do you have a favorite course?
Hardrock.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the San Juans. I'll be racing Uray this summer, so I'll be back in the San Juans. So really looking forward to being back out there. I think that's probably one of the most beautiful areas that I've been.
There's a different race in Uray other than Hardrock?
The Uray 100. Yeah.
Okay.
It's said to be one of the more or most challenging hundreds. It's about 41,000 feet of gain. So about 9,000 more than Hardrock.
Is it a similar trail system?
There are some trails that it shares with Hardrock, and there's others that are different. There's a lot of out and backs, so it's not the best course. Like Hardrock's one giant loop, and that's why I love it so much. Mm-hmm. But it's going to have some, obviously some very challenging sections. So looking forward to that.
That's that whole area of what is it, Ridgewood or Ridgeway and Uray and Telluride and all around that area in the San Juans is just it feels otherworldly.
I know. Yeah.
Very cool.
I agree.
All right. Last one. Goals for the rest of this year. Do you have anything that you set as a goal?
So I'm doing 5 100s this summer. They're part of the Rocky Mountain Slam. So another Grand Slam. So goal to finish the Rocky Mountain Slam. So as I was saying, we'll be in Idaho in a few weeks here running the Scout Mountain 100. Then it's Uray 100. The following week after Uray is Crazy Mountain in Montana. And then we go up to Wyoming and do the Wyoming Range 100 in August. And then you finish off with the Bear that goes from basically Logan, Utah to Bear Lake in Idaho. Wow. So, so we'll be traveling around out west.
This is your family vacation?
Exactly.
Very nice. Well, Aaron, this has been great, man. And it happens for me over and over again that if I get introduced to someone for this podcast, it's like we're all cut from the same cloth. So the conversations are easy, they flow. I don't have to come in with a whole prepared list of things. We just kind of vibe as we go and it works. So I appreciate you being generous with your time and your wisdom from the experiences that you've gone through as a runner and as a coach. And I think anyone listening will get a lot from this. So thank you very much.
Thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the On Adventure podcast. Be on the lookout for another episode dropping in a couple weeks. And be sure to go to our YouTube page and subscribe and follow us there, as well as on all the socials from Facebook to Instagram and LinkedIn. Until our next episode, I hope you stay safe and stay on adventure.